Right.
Welcome.
Welcome back to the Blockument. Crypto education through everyday conversations. Man,
Nailed
my
it.
brain still, it's still. You would think this many shows in, 30 plus shows in, I'd have it down. Hey, everybody. Welcome. How you doing? My name is Nate Televit. I'm the executive director of Detroit Blockchain Center, and to my right is the marvelous.
I'm Ashlee Rose. I am an everyday mother. I'm an online reseller, and I'm on a journey to figure out what in the world is all of this Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto stuff about. Like, what is it about?
It's about money.
And also, is it what everybody says it is? You know what I mean? Like, you hear all like the rumors and all the like mainstream, if you will, thoughts about it.
Yeah.
Which is why I wanted to do this particular show.
What's this particular show?
Why isn't Bitcoin private?
Why isn't Bitcoin private?
Like private money.
All right. Well, we can.
Because
dig
everybody
into
always
it.
says that it is private. Oh, it's anonymous.
Well, they're close.
Yeah. But we'll get into it.
Let's dig into it. Where are we at right now? What time is it according to the chain?
The Bitcoin watch.
The time chain. The Bitcoin watch. They sell those.
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin clocks and stuff based off the block height.
Oh, yeah? Oh, cool. So we are at block number 813,341. And the block size is 1.55 megabytes. That is comprised of 3,562 transactions. And let's see here. The total subsidies and fees that were won were 6.424 Bitcoin, which equates to 192,153 US dollars. And the winners of that beautiful, beautiful amount of moolah was F2 Pool.
F2 Pool.
Yep.
All right. So that's what time it is. Now you know we definitely recorded this show at least after that block, right? All right. So your question was what? Why isn't Bitcoin private?
Yeah. Because everybody always says, "Oh, it's anonymous money on the interwebs."
On the interwebs, it's let's start with a metric. What do you tell them?
Oh boy. Well, it's been a journey on what I tell them. I used to be like, "Yeah, cool. That's really it is. It's private. Like, you know, stick it to the man. Don't let him know what you're doing. You know, let's skirt some." Taxes.
Okay.
I don't know if I should say that, but
she was joking.
That was a joke. That was for humor and entertainment purposes only.
Right. See, the audience got it.
Yeah, and then like I started going to like meetups and stuff, and people are like, "That's wrong," and I'd be like, "What? That's like what the foundation of everything I know about this is built on." And then I think it's something that's called like pseudo-anonymous or pseudonymous or something.
Pseudonymous, yeah.
Which I'm not even really sure what that means.
So
there we go.
Okay. Yeah, there's a big misunderstanding on it, mostly because in the early days of actual Bitcoin usage, there was a lot of usage for it for online dark web markets. And I think even people who were really familiar with Bitcoin, not on the development side because they knew better, and the cryptography side they knew better, I would hope. But because, it's a dark market, I don't want any law agency to figure out what I'm doing.
Right.
But that isn't necessarily the reason something like Bitcoin, Bitcoin became so popular there. It's because of its actual intent, which is peer-to-peer transactions. If you wanted to get something off the black market, and, to be clear, there's a lot of even misnomers about what the black market really consisted of. Most of it was people like just buying like some weed and stuff that's, at least in the U.S., is legal now. Or rapidly becoming legal, but it wasn't then. But how do you do this without having to go to some shady neighborhood, and worry about that? This actually allowed people, to either gain access to medicines they weren't legal in their country, weren't available, And usually you could stop that because you could, through any other traditional banking system, the government sets out these policies that say citizens can't do this. The problem the government has is it can't enforce those policies, right? Like it can enforce them on a one-to-one basis, but it can't blanket enforce certain policies. So it'll say, this drug is illegal. Nobody can do this drug.
Yeah. Oh,
when has
I
that
see what
ever
you're
stopped anybody from doing drugs?
I see what you're saying.
Now, what they can do is selectively find some people.
Right.
Right.
Make
Enforcement is really hard. So where they can, what they do is they pass off the responsibility of enforcement to these middlemen. For example, banks.
Okay.
Banks don't really care what you use money for. All they care about is,
Right.
are you going to pay me back
Right.
so I can make more of this money,
Right.
Or more profits. But the government says, well, we can't enforce this, but they all use you, this bank. So you have to enforce it, or we're going to take away your banking license.
Right.
And so if you wanted to get your mother sick, or a family member is sick and they're in some pain and something like marijuana is illegal in your country and you need to get access to it, you could use like a black market thing, but how do you get the money to the actual dealer, right?
If you
And
can't use it,
Bitcoin allows you to do that because it bypasses the middleman. There is nobody for the government to come and say, enforce our rule.
And you're saying also without having to go meet somebody in a shady area in a dark alley.
Well, that's the benefit of a
With
black
cash.
market. That's the benefit of a black market, but Bitcoin doesn't solve that half of the equation because you still got to get it. And then the government, usually you use the post office. And if
So
you're not
then
the post office, you
wouldn't
still
our-
got a middleman there
Yeah.
on the delivery aspect.
But then, so wouldn't our like rebuttal to that be, well, why wouldn't you just use cash?
Well, you can't. Well, how are you going to use cash?
Pull it out from the ATM.
And then how do you get it to somebody in, I don't know, Latin America who's going to send you the whatever? Or on the other side of the country who's going to get you whatever? How do you get the money to them?
Mail it to them.
And then you got another middleman because
Yeah.
the post office inspects everything that goes through it. And if they see you just randomly sending off bulks of cash and not declaring it, they're going to say, why? And then they're going to pass that to the FBI, who's then going to watch that package.
Like, how much bulks we talking about? Like, I didn't know you had to declare it. Like, if you're just mailing something.
Well, they
over.
always ask you, like, insurance and stuff like that. Is there anything valuable in here? Sending off $1,500 or $500 is something of value. If it gets lost,
Yeah.
you're going to probably want to go to the post office and like, where's my envelope? Well, why? What was in it?
Yeah.
Not to mention, you don't think they're scanning all this stuff.
Yeah. I don't know.
So they know. So Bitcoin solves that problem. And it's instant settlement. Once you pay them in Bitcoin, generally it's there in 10 minutes or so, an hour, for the other confirmations.
Okay. So then that's building the case for why it would be beneficial.
Well, this is why
to
they
be
used it. Yeah, that's why it's beneficial to
private.
use, not private. But people thought, well, I don't want everybody to know my business, so
Right.
it also must be private. And that's where a lot of the misconception that Bitcoin is private, on top of it is pseudonymous. It can be very private. It's private by default, right? Especially if used the way it was built to be used, which nobody does these days. But they did back in those days. So there wasn't such a thing as Coinbase or Cash App using Bitcoin and exchanges. They didn't exist back then. Mt. Gox even was just coming around at the same sort of time. So how did you get Bitcoin? It's meant to be gotten peer-to-peer, right? So there was no KYC. And Bitcoin is pseudonymous, which means anonymous means basically nobody can trace it back to any individual. You're totally anonymous. It's actually probably one of those things that don't really exist. Everything's probably just higher levels of pseudonymity. Pseudonymity.
Anonymity.
There's variant ranges of that, right? Because to be totally anonymous means nobody will ever know your identity no matter what.
Right.
And especially in this digital age, that's an impossible metric to be 100%.
Yeah.
You can Satoshi this thing right? Like nobody knows who Satoshi is.
Yet.
Right? Yet. But all it takes is one slip up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oops, Satoshi's never spent Satoshi's Bitcoins that we know about. We have no idea if Satoshi has 10,000 other wallets off to the side and has 10 times as much Bitcoin stored there. Nobody knows any of this, but all it takes is for Satoshi to sign the wrong transaction by accident. And
oh, there he is.
There he is.
Yep.
So anonymity doesn't really exist in a pure form. But that being said, so why isn't Bitcoin private? Well,
wait. So then what is pseudonymity?
Well, pseudonymity is what is, let's see, what's a good example here? You listen to music?
Yep.
All right. Are you familiar? I'm just going to throw some artist out, and I'm going to age myself because I don't really know. What is, I don't know.
Are you going to say like a dead
What's Lil Durk's real name?
Oh, Dirk.
Right. That's pseudonymity, right? You can find it out, but it's not put out. And if an artist or an entertainer, what's Angelina Jolie's real name, or what's your twiddle handle? If it's at, guess my name.
Yeah.
If that's your handle, nobody really knows that's you, right? But somebody someplace knows it's you. Twitter or Facebook or TikTok, because you have to register and you usually got to use an email. So at least they know your email. Some people put their full name in their email address. Yeah. Maybe you have a sort of pseudonymous email account, but most email accounts ask you for a phone number.
Right.
Right? So now you can trade. There's a chain that leads right back to you. If you're very careful and crafty about it, you can keep that anonymity. You're anonymous until you're not.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that's really what pseudonymity is. I'm going to have this alias so I can build this sort of barrier. And when you're using Bitcoin or really any crypto, you have a public key. That's just a random string of letters and numbers. That is your identity. You're saying to somebody on the other end of the transaction, I am BC13782GR4.
So it's kind of like a username?
A username is that. I wouldn't say it is a username. A username is synonymous.
Okay.
Right? Your public address is like a username. Your public address is like an email address. Okay. Right? So Bitcoin is that. And it was designed to be peer-to-peer, where you don't have KYC, you don't have exchanges, so you definitely don't have KYC.
Right.
And it was also designed to you're not supposed to reuse the same public key, right? Your one private key, those 12 words will just, if you're a technical Bitcoin user, I'm trying to keep this simple. I don't want to see in the comments or anything like, well, that's not actually what a private key is, right? But for simplicity, right, those 12 words, which allow you to derive your private key and everything.
The seed phrase? Is that
the seed phrase. Okay. That is like your password.
Okay. That
generates all these different usernames, as you would say, the public addresses.
Hold on, I'm going to write this down. Okay, go ahead.
Right. And then your wallet does all this. This is the function your wallet really provides for you. Especially with Bitcoin, your wallet says, all right, well, based off of this, here's your username for your next transaction. The next time you want to receive some Bitcoin, you'll receive it here, right? And then Alice sends you some Bitcoin. Cool. That's there. That's yours. Then if you have any halfway decent wallet, especially in the Bitcoin realm, because like Ethereum doesn't work like this, then the next time when Bob sends you money, it gives you a whole new username, a whole new address. So Bob sends it, and then Charlie sends it, and then Dave sends it. And they all send it to different addresses. And why that's helps with your pseudonymity is because any outside person looking at the blockchain, they see Alice sent this random user money.
Right.
They see Bob sent some other random user money. They have no idea the same user controls both addresses.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? And so
But both addresses lead to the same wallet?
both addresses are controlled by the same private key, by the same seed phrase.
Okay.
Right? So if you now spend some money that Alice sent you, and you make sure it stays within the amount Alice sent you. If she sent you 1 Bitcoin, you don't send more than 1 Bitcoin from that wallet.
Right.
Then again, an outside observer just sees, well, this user went and bought a car. Well, you do the same thing with the money Bob sent you, and you go and buy some food. They don't know that's the same person, right? Nobody out looking can know it's the same person.
Right.
But if you mess up,
Yeah.
and this is where it's more pseudonymous.
Yeah.
If you spend, Alice only sent you 1 Bitcoin, Bob sent you a half a Bitcoin.
Right.
You go buy something for 1.5 Bitcoin.
It pulls
right?
from both.
It'll pull from both wallets.
And then it'll dox that other.
And that goes to a single address. So either 2 different people sent this one wallet money at the exact same time and into a combined UTX for that person, a combined transaction, or it's the same person. And that's how places like chain analysis and stuff work. Those blockchain sort of sleuths, anybody who's like analyzing the blockchain, that's what they do. And so that's a ding on privacy, because you can be private, but you have to be super aware of what you're doing. You have to use a wallet that helps you with all of
like
this.
Thinking too much, honestly.
It becomes a challenge, especially because we don't live in a world where when Bitcoin was created and for its first few years of existence, we don't live in that world, right? When Bitcoin was designed, again, exchanges weren't really a thought.
Right. Well, because the purpose is peer-to-peer, not peer-to third party to peer.
Right. And, the assumption of how people would onboard was just sort of ultimately wrong. So it becomes non-private. So now you have other people who are mostly Bitcoiners, to begin with. They look at it and be like, that's a problem, because there are some fundamental issues in the world, right? Your right to own property. So we have to sort of talk about rights really quick, but right. So there's 2 views of rights, right? You have rights which are natural rights. Some people would say God-given rights, like you have a what's it say in the
like a right to life.
Yeah, like a right to life.
And I think happiness, or is that not one of them?
So, well, pursuit of happiness, right? You're not guaranteed to be happy, but you're guaranteed to pursue happiness, right? A right to do that.
It's all in the mind, anyways.
Right. So there's certain things people feel like you have human rights, and that evolves over time. So people eventually were like, well, water is a human right. People have a right to water. People now in the common digital age, it's becoming a thing, and people have a right to have internet access, or at least access some internet somehow. Maybe not in your own home so you can watch Netflix, but you should have access to it, especially since you can't do much with it. So there's the natural rights, and then there's the law-given rights, right? You have the government would say you have a natural right to travel anywhere you want to, right? You do not have a natural right to drive a motorized vehicle on public roads. That's a permission, right?
Yeah.
Some people would argue, well, if anybody can take that right away from you, it's not a right, it's a privilege anyway.
Right.
It's the old George Carlin sort of thing, right? So I have a right to travel. Well, can the government stop you from traveling? Yes. Well, it's not a right, it's a privilege.
Right.
So people would say privacy, the right to transact is a right, a natural right. A human should be able to transact with another human. It's just a natural right. There shouldn't really be policy or anything in place to prevent that, especially if that transaction is not causing harm to anybody involved or any third party. Right? So this is like the claim for why drugs shouldn't be illegal. Right? If I'm doing, especially something like marijuana or some people say shrooms or whatever your
something
drug
natural,
of choice, whatever your drug de jour or whatever it is. So you got these rights. Some people, a lot of people, I'm one of them, would also say privacy is a right. I have a right to be private in private places. That's why in this country it's the actual constitutional right. right? You're secure in your own dwellings and belongings
Allegedly.
and papers. Well, in a country of laws, right? You should, but it is allegedly because they try to detract that from you.
A little bit more than try, but
Yeah.
I digress.
So that being said, Bitcoin solves a serious issue of the right to transact and a right to own property, right? Bitcoin is an asset. It's property. When you own it, this is the censorship resistant part of what makes Bitcoin special, right? Censorship resistance, permissionless, no middleman, right? So peer-to-peer, permissionless, censorship resistant. Censorship resistant is pertaining to the right to own property. Nobody should be able to take your property away from you. So Bitcoin solves that problem, and it addresses that right. But the way it does it is using a public distributed ledger, so everybody can see what's going on. And it makes it extremely hard for anybody to cheat. And even if they do cheat, it makes it extremely easy to catch the cheaters really, really quick. That's great. But it opens the door for privacy issues.
Yeah.
It's not private now. Now, you can jump through a lot of hoops, especially the way it's designed today, and maintain your privacy.
Yeah.
But, and I hate the word but because it always sort of contradicts the first half of the sentence, but that's sort of what this does, right? It's contradicting the first half.
Yeah.
There is most people aren't good at privacy, and it only gets harder the more digitally advanced the world gets.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to go off the grid these days. You used to be able to go off the grid, like, you get into a car crash and you always want to disappear anyway. You just get out the car and be like, we don't know what happened. We're going to presume they're dead, and you're off living your best life and whatever.
Yep.
Can't do that as easily today. So there's a lot of Bitcoiners and cypherpunks and people who are just interested in peer-to-peer money, that aspect, because they do realize the heavy importance of it. But they're like, we need privacy, though.
Yeah.
And that becomes this long debate. So what's the best way to do that? And so you have these alternates in the crypto realm, like Monero and Zcash, and there's a handful of others. I'll primarily talk about Monero because out of all the privacy coins, it's the largest.
Are any of the ones that you said also called Tornado Cash, or that's a separate one?
Tornado Cash is not a privacy coin.
Oh, okay. Well, then forget about it.
But that's one of the ways you can do, like when people were using, we should address that real quick. So you can have your privacy coins, which basically take, all right, Bitcoin is great for what Bitcoin is, but if you want to add privacy, how do you do it, right? There's that argument. And this is why you don't see currently today privacy directly on Bitcoin. We can delve into the details of that. So you have things like, let's say, Monero, who are like, well, let's change these fundamental aspects of Bitcoin. And now it's basically, Monero is just basically Bitcoin
With privacy.
With privacy.
Okay.
Right. Zcash is another one. It's another really large one, which is also basically Bitcoin, but with privacy. It's just Monero and Zcash take two different approaches on how privacy is done. Right. But to contradict the first half of the sentence, right? The Bitcoiners, while they might look at both of those and be like, that's interesting, again, what's the problem Bitcoin is trying to solve or is solving at this point? And a big, huge piece of that is throughout time, humans could cheat money. Once you put the rules of money in these mathematical equations like cryptography, and you let math do the deciding, not some small group of unelected officials at some private bank making all the decisions, we all have the same rule expectations now, right? A lot of people will be like, well, Bitcoin is secure, is that deal because there's only ever going to be 21 million. So true, that gives to a limited supply, but if you up that to 25 million, does it all of a sudden break Bitcoin? No.
But it opens.
It does if some random small group if Blockstream had the control that a lot of haters think they have, or if Bitcoin core developers had the control that people think are miners, and they were just like, you know what, there's 25 million Bitcoin, then yeah, that would be fun. That would break Bitcoin. But that's not how Bitcoin works.
Yeah.
The entire community would have to agree.
Yeah.
And if we all agree, we would also agree to a time schedule. And so the inflation rate wouldn't matter as much anymore because it's predictable. It's the
Right.
unpredictability of markets that becomes a problem.
Right.
And Bitcoin solves that mostly through its transparency. Everybody can see all the rules. If somebody tries to change the rules, we can just be like, I don't accept that, and
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
With a privacy coin, especially baked into layer one, one of the issues of that is you can't see that. So like,
It opens the door to
if there's an
cheating.
inflation bug, so Bitcoin had an inflation bug, right? And it's fairly popular. Like one day somebody, I forgot exactly how they did it to explain it, but basically there all of a sudden there was like hundreds of millions of Bitcoin out there, or a billion Bitcoin out there, right? But it's transparent. Everybody saw it. They fixed the code,
Right.
pushed out a fork. We did a hard fork real quick. Boom, fixed. In a privacy coin, that may go undetected because it's
Right.
not, you can't see the issuance.
Right.
So you have to trust that the initial code was all good. And it's a lot harder now. Like Monero's had I think Monero had an inflation bug at one point, and it's hard to detect.
Yeah.
You can, but it's hard.
Right.
Um,
So then I guess having too much privacy then opens the door to possibilities of cheating. Is this?
Well, yeah, cheating, it's still software bugs. There's code issues with the bugs, right? The biggest argument that traditional Bitcoiners would have, a lot of Bitcoiners tended to like Monero, right? And so it's like, all right, I want privacy too.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds. I think it sounds.
So like
cool.
I might save in Bitcoin because that type of pseudonymity is easy. If I don't buy it from an exchange, or I'm really careful on how I do it, I use something like a Bitcoin version of a Tornado Cash, potentially. We'll get into that in a second. My savings can be anonymous to a very low degree, but since I'm not using it
Right.
often,
Right.
the chances of me ruining that anonymity are very minimal.
Yeah.
But for my spending stash, right, you might take that and it's like, all right, when I need it, I'll take some Bitcoin and convert it over to Monero, and then I'll spend in Monero. Because I'm not worried about the inflation bugs. I'm not worried about that because I don't plan on holding this
Yeah,
very long.
you're gonna just
I'm just spending it, and the amount I'm keeping there is so low. Even if there was an issue, I'm not losing my entire value, my entire savings or portfolio.
Right. Right. Because you were intending on spending that anyways. So.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, nobody wants to lose even $5, but if
Right.
it did happen, that's usually not going to economically ruin somebody versus
Right.
your life savings.
Right.
So that's sort of the argument. It's like I can spend using this, but now you sort of have an argument for a multi-chain world, which some
Right.
people don't want, or theoretically maybe you can't have, especially because Monero is also proof of work. And there's arguments on why there can only really be one proof of work.
Oh gosh,
Token.
I'm gonna write that down. Is that
Yeah.
something for a later day?
That's another whole
Okay.
other thing. Can there be more than one proof of work token? Probably not. But get into that in a whole nother show. Yeah. So that's one way. You can have a privacy coin. Another way Bitcoin addresses this is historically is through mixers, especially if you're doing non-KYC stuff. You could, like back in the days, again, when it was heavily used on the black market, it's still sort of heavily used on the black market, but it went from being a large chunk of its usage to these days, I'm going to lie about the percentage. I'm going to say less than 2%. I have no idea what the percentage, but it's very, 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 very low percentage of its actual usage. How you would do it is, theoretically, to keep all of your pseudonymity, is you would buy it peer-to-peer somehow. One way to do that way back in the days, I've heard, is you could do like a Bitcoin ATM, right? Because then the KYC restrictions on an ATM was very, very low. You go to wherever you can go buy a burner phone because all they asked was for your mobile number for a text confirmation. So you go spend $20 and buy a burner phone. You give the ATM that number. You confirm the text. You give it your wallet. Boom. There's no trace back to you besides your geolocation.
But nowadays,
I mean, they have a lot more cameras built into them. You're supposed to scan your IDs, I think. And so I haven't used an ATM in so long.
Yeah,
but it's a lot higher of a thing now.
Yeah.
But you could do that, but then that isn't where you stopped. Then you would get that, and then you could use these Bitcoin mixers. And how a mixer works, like you mentioned Tornado Cash, that's on Ethereum. But there's Bitcoin mixers.
Oh, my bad.
There's Bitcoin mixers for Bitcoin as well, but most of them are custodial.
Meaning what? Meaning that mixer holds the
Yeah, you're
custody?
giving up the keys. You're giving up your Bitcoin for a temporary time span. So how it would work is I have one Bitcoin that I want to convert. I wanted to, even though I didn't use KYC, I still want to separate where I bought it from and the actual final place I keep it or send it. And so what I would do is maybe I'll send one Bitcoin to this service. It used to just be literally like a person who you would just send them the Bitcoin. They'll charge you a fee. And then they'll wait. You would sort of set what type of time frame. Like I'd like it back in about an hour or two. I'd like it back in a day or two. Right. But based on how long you kept it, you could get more sort of anonymity because I might wait until I have so much Bitcoin in here. So anybody looking at the blockchain just sees all these random addresses, purely random addresses, sending Bitcoin to this one address. And then you would give me where you wanted to end up. So you'd already have a second address. But I would take Bitcoin that Dave sent me and maybe mix it in with some Bitcoin that Alice sent me and then send that back to you. And so now there's this huge mixing
And there's no
pool.
sense that they could follow, no pattern that they could follow.
There is, but it becomes much, much harder, right? So if I'm just looking at the blockchain, I'm seeing 100 different addresses go to one address and then random amounts, because the other option you had was, well, you sent in one, right? Let's assume you paid the fee separately, so you're going to get one back, right? You sent in one. Not only could you say when you want it, but then you could determine how many sort of transactions you wanted in. So I might send it to you in 10 different transactions. I might send you 0.5 Bitcoin and then wait 20 minutes and then send you 0.03 Bitcoin, 0.4 Bitcoin until you got your whole one. So again, if I'm looking, all I see is one address that I can't identify because you didn't buy it from a KYC exchange. Goes to this pool, goes to this single address. Then this whole other address gets 0.3 Bitcoin.
So
and
it's
then an hour later, another address gets a 0.06 Bitcoin, but they're all controlled by you. I can't tell that.
It's
though.
like sending in a picture to someone, and then that someone chopping the picture up into a puzzle, and then sending you back a puzzle piece or two at a time, and nobody can know what that image is until you have all the puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
So it makes it harder.
Sure. Yep. And then every puzzle piece is every puzzle piece has a tape over it, so you can't even see what's on the thing. So all you really have is the shape. And that shape for Bitcoin would be the amount.
Got it.
So the more studying you can do, you can sort of now, if there's only two people in the pool, right? The less people that are in that shared pool for a mixer, the easier it is to sort of figure out
what's going
where,
on.
when, and what's going on.
Yeah.
Which becomes an argument on why that's crappy and you need it in layer one. And this is what somebody like from Monero might say. It has to be baked in to layer one. I'm of the mindset personally that I sort of agree. If you really want privacy has to be a default. Like a problem with Zcash was not so much the ZK proofs that they used, zero knowledge proofs.
Oh, okay.
That's what the Z stood for. It's not, even though that was risky because they did their own implementation of it, and it's just now starting to be used in the crypto world, in the Bitcoin world. because it's been around for so long now. But then it was still sort of a new technology. But even that wasn't so much the problem. More so that, like with Zcash, it was an option. You could choose to be anonymous, or you could choose not to be anonymous. And then that was off by default. So by default, it was just like using Bitcoin.
So
and again, if everybody, like my favorite part of the whole COVID lockdown experience was everybody was required to wear a mask. In a world where I know there's a camera on every house that I walk by, every corner, all the street lights, I loved the idea of having to wear a mask for that. Because they confuse the cameras, it's harder to track my movements, and I just like the peace of mind that provided. But when I'm the only asshole walking down the street with a mask, it doesn't serve the same purpose.
Right.
Everybody has to be private, or nobody's really private. You know?
That's a good point.
And that sort of narrows approach. There is no option. You're just private. But then you run into those like inflation bug. You can't really see the code, you can't audit it, and that sort of gets rid of the original point. They contend against each other. So how do you do both?
Oh, it's a real conundrum, I feel like.
But that is why isn't BTC private? Because it's a conundrum. I can't think of, I know of Bitcoiners who, I don't know of a Bitcoiner who argues nobody needs privacy.
Right.
I do hear them say, I've heard some say it's not as important. You can do it on a higher level. You can do it through, there's privacy by design, right? Like, what's a good example? I guess guessing your password, right? Having a password. You get to make that up in your brain. And if you make something up that's complex enough where even a supercomputer would take millions of years to guess, but simple enough for you to remember, well, then that's sort of privacy by design versus privacy through obfuscation.
I don't know what that
me
is.
and words don't get along today. So this is more like the pool, like the mixing pool, right? I'm going to send it. I'm going to try to hide it amongst a bunch. Think of every like action thriller movie you've ever seen. Cops are chasing whoever. They're trying to get away, and they go under a bridge. And then swap cars, and then leave the bridge in a whole different car, right? And it's like, oh, no, we're chasing a Ferrari, and that's a station wagon. Can't be our bad guy, right? They've used a bridge to obfuscate. I know I'm saying that wrong. The switch. That's like a mixer. It's like pulling into a parking lot with 500 different cars. Nobody can see you switch cars and pulling out. With that, but if you're the only car that goes in, and then some random other car is the only car that leaves, that's not very good masking. Right. But if you pull in, it's like the same thriller, except instead of a car, that's not me, right? All right. One of us is popular. Is it call-in? No, it can't be a call-in.
Oh no,
could be. I don't know.
Say.
All right.
Anyways, that was a phantom phone.
Hello? You're on live, and you're gone.
Maybe they were trying to reach us about our extended car warranty.
All right. Man, that threw me off.
I know. You were saying, I think you were going to say as long as like three cars came in.
The same thriller, right? The same spy, Jason Bourne thing. Somebody's chasing you. You walk into a parade where there's already dozens and dozens of people walking into the parade on one side, and then you walk out of the parade with dozens and dozens of people also walking out of the parade. That's much harder. Right. That's a much harder to identify. It's a better mask for you. That's how pools should work. And there's going to be Bitcoiners who say that is how privacy, you can just do privacy like that. Yeah. Privacy through obfuscation versus privacy by design.
I got to say, it sounds like you can just do privacy like that.
Well,
But are you saying because you have to give up your custody, it's not great?
what I'm saying is, if you look at only the privacy aspects of it all, right,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at a design like Monero, right, it is there are some people who said they've broken the privacy connection in Monero. I haven't seen hard proof of that. So as far as I'm concerned,
Right.
Monero has remained private. If you use Monero, if you go into Monero, even if you go into Monero through KYC processes, once you're in,
Right.
nobody knows what you're doing. They can see you walk into the club. Nobody can ever see you walk out, right? That is versus the obfuscation mode. They can track some of that. And what they do now, right, is someplace like Coinbase, they can't stop you from using a mixer, but like a Tornado Cash, like you mentioned, what they do with the Tornado Cash is they just sanctioned all the smart contract address. And they said, look, if your Ethereum has ever touched, because remember, Ethereum is just as open and public as Bitcoin, and there's not even address swapping, right? It's an account-based thing. So your 0x account is your 0x account for all of your transactions. If your 0x account touched a mixer, they can see that forever. So 500 years later,
Yeah.
if it's still around, I can still trace that all the way back. And hey, you touched a mixer once, and then all the government has to do is say, look, if it's ever touched a mixer,
Yeah.
you never ever can accept it. And so it doesn't stop you from using it within the Ethereum's circumstance, but if you ever want to pull
Right.
that out,
Right.
and because we're a world where right now we're so reliant on exchanges for on ramps and off ramps, or just any on ramp or off ramp,
Right.
that becomes an issue.
Right.
So that's why isn't BTC private? Why isn't Bitcoin private? Because what's more important, privacy or right to transact? And that's an opinion. So you're more than welcome to disagree with that opinion. My preference is, first, I want to have, when it comes to money, I want to have transparent money. Then the very next step is, how can I make this transparent peer-to-peer money private? I do really want the privacy, but
Yeah.
I'd rather have, if you have private money, but you can't audit the code, you don't know if anybody's cheating,
Right. Yeah. Then
what's the point of the privacy?
Yeah.
But if I know the rules can't be changed, I can find a way to do privacy. Right? So that's my approach to it.
Well, I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this.
Me too.
So please, hit us up on the socials and let us know what you think, because this is it's a conundrum. It's really
It is.
I don't know.
And in case you were wondering what happened a little earlier with the phone ringing thing, this is a pre-recorded show. But if you're listening on a Sunday at 11 a.m. where we say we're live,
Yeah.
you can actually call in. So you could actually just call in and let us know.
Yeah. Give us your opinion right on the spot.
Give us your opinion around the spot. You'll see the number. That's how you can tell if we're live or not. When we're not live, we don't really publish the call-in number. When we are live, we publish a call-in number. So watch every Sunday at 11 and figure out if we're live or not.
And to be clear, we're not live when you watch this. That's just so you can
this
save
one
that
is
in your
not
phone.
Live, yeah. But just save the number. So next time somebody walks up to you and says, Bitcoin's private, isn't it? What do you say?
I'm going to say, no, it's not private, but you could use Monero to make it private if you'd like.
There you go. Send them off to Shitcoinville. Yes, you can use Monero, and almost everybody who tells you they don't use Monero or some kind of privacy thing, it's Bitcoin only, they're probably lying to you.
Yeah.
Because if you want privacy in your transactions, well, let me just add this caveat before we wrap up. There is one other over the past few years that has developed. You could use something like Lightning Network. And Lightning Network is sort of that obfuscation approach. I know, me and words today. I haven't had enough of my breakfast bourbon yet.
Yeah. The brain's broken.
My brain's broken until it soaks in.
Yeah.
Something like the Lightning Network, which is, a system like that, which is better for everyday transactions anyway, also builds in privacy in transactions, because channels, how Lightning Net works, we can go over that some other time if we haven't in the past. That builds a layer of privacy in there. And so if most people are transacting on the Lightning Network, that gets more and more
Like
anonymous every day. And it gets more and more private every day.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's nice.
So yeah, if that becomes a technology that really truly succeeds and steps forward, and there's a lot of other innovation in Bitcoin, and this is why, you know, the argument of why you didn't need to take the Monero approach in Bitcoin, because there's so many things that have just come out this year in Bitcoin that will allow you on the transactional front to add that privacy in, and be more like the parade setup than the single card or bridge setup.
Okay. I do have more questions.
You get that.
But probably will.
Well, check us out on Block Notes.
Yeah.
So, why isn't Bitcoin private? Well, because it's hard. And if you want to hear the extra questions, you can check us out on Block Notes, our YouTube only show that usually airs a few days after the main show. So this is going to be on a Sunday when we launch. So by the Wednesday, and if you've listened well beyond when we've launched, go check us out on YouTube.
Yep.
Where else can they find us?
Facebook at the Blockument, Twitter or X at the Blockument. Let's see, TikTok at the Blockument, and theblockument.com. The Blockument.
The Blockument. Talk about branding.
Yeah.
All right. So until then, come for the riches.
Stay for the revolution.
Viva la revolution. Peace.
Peace.